Well, this is part two, promised you on diversity, equity, and inclusion, part two. Now, the controversial guidelines for courts in the UK introduced a mitigating factor which courts should consider when sentencing offenders. Judges and magistrates should now take account of the difficult and or deprived background or personal circumstances of offenders before they put them in prison and when they let them out. Such disadvantages include, get this, but are not limited to, experiences of discrimination, negative experiences of authority, early experience of loss, neglect or abuse, negative influences from their peers, low educational attainment, insecure housing, mental health difficulties, poverty, and being a direct or indirect victim of domestic abuse. So if you are one of those so-called victims, then the courts will deal with you differently to someone who has not suffered discrimination, has not experienced negative experiences with authority, and have not experienced early loss or neglect or abuse, or need negative influences from peers. And let's face it, we've all been subject to bullies at schools and low educational attainment. Well, is that the person's own responsibility for negative educational attainment? I believe so. There we go. The change has attracted commentary in the national press, with the Daily Telegraph leader column today calling the criteria for judging disadvantage is subjective. Lawyers for alleged offenders will have a field day exploiting these factors to reduce the sentence of their clients, the Daily Telegraph states. Put starkly, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, teaches that two-tier policing in the pursuit of social justice has become a desirable feature. They're denying that it's two-tier policing, but there you have it. The courts will judge people. The police are judging people by saying, oh, have you experienced discrimination? Oh, well, we'll treat you differently. Oh, have you had negative experiences with us before, with the authorities? Oh, we'll treat you differently. Have you been negative influences from your fellow peers at school or at work or in the street? Have you got a low educational attainment? Oh, well, we'll treat you differently. It's rubbish. Rubbish. I can't say it strongly enough. When it comes to the police and the justice system, this ideology is all about undermining and being squeezed into a core institutions founded to enable traditional notions of fairness. It undermines fairness if you've got different rules for different people. Equity is now promoted through diversity, equity, and inclusion that encourages the police to treat with favour fear individuals who may be guilty of a crime more leniently because of the overarching aim of achieving cohesion through the recognition of victim groups, the so-called victim groups. And while recent highly controversial changes to sentencing guidelines that enable judges to reduce sentences are not explicitly about recognising victim group status, in practice they can and likely will be used in that way. Well, obviously, because although it says it's not explicit, well, of course it is, because it talks about are you a victim? Are you a victim? Are you a victim? Have you been treated unfairly? Are you experiencing with authority and with your fellow peers? They're saying, oh, it doesn't necessarily make, but it does. It does. I sort of end up losing my track of mind because I'm so annoyed at these laws that are coming out. So it's going to increase the difficulty to assess whether a judge has taken individual factors into account in sentencing, or whether they are in practice simply delivering woke reparative justice through reduced sentences. And the police the same. Are they taking people to prison, or fining them, or taking them to jail and keeping them there for a few hours because they've said something on the internet, or they've stood within 150 meters silently, not bothering anybody, within 150 meters of an abortion clinic? They are, and yet ignoring violence, setting fire to buildings and cars and buses by Muslim gangs in the streets. Well, I'm not going to tell you, but you know that this is happening. In short, your average member of the police force is in a pickle. On the one hand, they're being trained to uphold the law, such as the Equality Act, and therefore that discrimination against individuals is harmful. But at the very same time, their diversity, equity, and inclusion training moulds a culture of behaviour that, in practice, treats people differently for doing the same things. This is the end of my second part. It's a quick one, but come